Yo, what is up, fellow gamers? This is your boy Wolf, aka the Orlando Magic of the NBA Finals, and I'm just here to give you this month in gaming history for May. Right now, I have my brother JD playing Halo 3 on Xbox 360. I didn't feel like being in front of the camera this time, so yeah. So let's get into this video. Like I said, this month in gaming history, the end of May. I crammed it in when I could. Had a little bit of time. Anyway, this month in gaming history is the history of E3. As you know, E3 is going on, and honestly, the first E3 started back in May of 1995. Let's go into it. Alright, E3 stands for Electronic Entertainment Expo. It started in May of 1995. It was planned to be a 3-day extravaganza to show off game company and game developers, to show off their best software, just to keep people more exposed into the video game industry. On that first E3 in May, it was at the LA Convention Center, and at that time it was around the 32-bit era with Sega Saturn and Sony, soon to be named PlayStation. This attracted over 28,000 members, which were fans at the time before they kind of limited on the spacing. Over 350 game firms were there, and they demonstrated over 1,300 games. That was astonishing. This was back in 95, so that was a major step. Also, the major aspects of this first E3 was the Nintendo Virtual Boy was to be announced, and the specs of N64 were to be shown. Also, SNK was to show off the Neo Geo CD, and you see how that was. So that was 95. Now let's go to 96. Once again, it was at the LA Convention Center. Nintendo's N64 was shown in full with Mario 64. Sony revealed the price slash of the PlayStation at $199. Also, in 96, we saw the first Unreal Engine first displayed. Enough said about that. In 97 of E3, it moved from the LA Convention Center to Atlanta due to space restrictions at the LA Convention Center. So, when it switched down to LA, we saw Half-Life and Unreal were finally revealed. Nintendo and Rare wound up showing off one of the greatest first-person shooters of all time. I think the name of the game is Goldeneye 07. Yes, on N64. Yes, that was first shown there. Eidos showed off Tomb Raider 2, and a game company called Konami showed off a game called Metal Gear Solid, but that really never caught on. I guess. Anyway, in 98 at E3, once again it was still held in Atlanta due to whatever occurred at LA. So anyway, it was the second year in Atlanta. Sega Dreamcast was shown in limited fashion. So Sega was hyping up the Dreamcast, but they just showed it to limited people. Sony wound up showing off Gran Turismo and the upcoming release of Metal Gear Solid, so they showed a few more trailers, maybe possibly a demo before it was time to release it later on that year. Nintendo showed off Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, which was on point, good game. Leaving 98, we go into 99, and this is where E3 moved back into the LA Convention Center, where it's currently been held since then. So in 99, you saw the Dreamcast was shown in full at $199. This was also Sega's last hardware, their last game system, before they, collapsed and went into software. Also, Sony had hyped up the PlayStation 2 in 99. And Nintendo briefly talked about its new game, which would wind up, this new game system, which wound up being the GameCube. So Nintendo was talking about that. The start of the new millennium in 2000, Sony showed off the PlayStation 2. Microsoft started coming into the game industry, and they showed off Xbox demos behind closed doors. Metal Gear Solid 2 demo stole that show, and also Halo was first shown to the public. Sega also wound up showing off its gaming online play through Sega Net, using the NFL 2K series as a model. In 2001 at E3, this was in 2001 at E3. This was months before the release of the Xbox and the GameCube. So Nintendo started hyping up the Game Boy Advance. Sony revealed its online plans with SOCOM 2. Sony also talked about Gran Turismo 3 and its exclusive at the time, Devil May Cry. Microsoft countered back by showing off Fable and Halo. Sega, who was also an independent software company, basically hyped up their video games of Sonic and Panzer Dragoon. Also, this was the first time you saw Grand Theft Auto 3, the landmark game that basically, you know, put gaming somewhere, I guess, on the map. Basically, it just blew up Rockstar. So that was there in 2001. In 2002, Doom was shown on the PC. Nintendo wound up showing off its exclusive lineup of Mario Sunshine, Metroid Prime, and Zelda the Wind Waker. Microsoft also announced the first ever Xbox Live at $50 a pop for a fee to gain access to the world's first integrated online network for a console. Also, Microsoft talked about its exclusive Ninja Gaiden. Also, at this 2002 E3, Sony announced that it had shipped 30 million PS2s worldwide, and Sony was also happy to announce the collaboration between Disney and Squaresoft for its Kingdom Hearts that was exclusively on PlayStation. 2003, we saw Half-Life 2 show off for PC games. Also, at this E3 in 2003, we saw the PSP. Nokia showed off the horrible, damaging game system, the N-Gage. It was horrible. That was so horrible. I remember seeing that. That was really bad. Resident Evil 4 was shown on GameCube. Metal Gear Solid 3 was shown on PlayStation 2. Also, this was also known as the rebirth of the Prince of Persia, which was shown in multi-platform release demo. So that was very hot. In 2004 at E3, Nintendo unveiled the Nintendo DS handheld. Halo 2 was basically the main attraction of this E3. Blizzard showed off World of Warcraft, and Sony kind of countered back with his God of War. 2005 E3, Sony talked about the PS3, but Sony had to counter back because Sony was accused of showing pre-rendered graphics instead of in-game graphics, so people was questioning did PS3 really have what they said, the graphics. On the Nintendo side of this E3, Nintendo was talking about the Wii, but they had very little to show. Microsoft was talking about the 360, but their lineup was kind of spotty, so people weren't sure about that. Also, Bethesda showed Elder Scrolls 4, Oblivion, and William Wright, the creator of The Sims, you should know who he is, showed off Spore for the first time. 2006, we saw the PS3. The Wii was talked about, basically through the Twilight Prince of Zelda, Metroid Prime, and Microsoft hyped up Gears of War. Spore was also shown again. Mass Effect, Quake came back, Crysis, Assassin's Creed, Bioshock was shown. Probably one of the biggest changes was in 2007 when E3 changed its name officially to E3 Media and Business Summit. It was more of a professional business tone, And there were no more side shows or attractions, so you didn't see the little rock star press conferences. You didn't see wrestlers wrestling to catch people's attention to the booth. You didn't see half-naked chicks. You didn't see stage events. You basically just saw journalists and industry professionals there, and they were only allowed by invite. So yes, that cut down on the fans, but it made it more of a business tone to be taken professionally. So to cut things up, to wrap things up, this is your boy Wolf, and I hope that I educated you on the brief quickness of E3. Alright, peace, I'm out.